In this video, we are going to learn about the difference between food chain and food web. The difference is not that much. It's very easy to understand, so we will quickly look into it. Let's understand what is a food chain. It is a straight single pathway through which food energy travels in the ecosystem. Now what I mean by that is, let's say there's a tree. Tree and plants are basically known as autotrophs or producers. Then comes herbivorous animals who feed on plants and trees for energy and food. They are also called as primary consumers. Then comes carnivorous animals who feed on the herbivorous animals for food and energy. Like this, if you notice, it forms a linear straight chain wherein one organism is eating another organism for food and energy. You see, the food energy is traveling from plants and trees to herbivorous animals and then to the carnivorous animals. Or in other words, the high-level organisms feed upon a single type of low-level organisms for food and energy. This is what is known as food chain. I hope this part is clear. In an ecosystem, there are many types of species that exist, and there are numerous amount of food chains. You'll see many species eating another species for food and energy, and that's how you will come across many food chains in an ecosystem. Now sometimes species of a particular community interacts directly as well as indirectly with the species of another community. More often, the indirect interaction between two species happens because of a third species. Overall, species can influence one another in many different ways. With this kind of indirect interaction among species, food webs are formed. I'll give you an example of a tertiary ecosystem. Let's say there's a plant which has some flowers. Then insect pollinators like bees, grasshoppers or flies feed on these leaves and flowers. Many species of birds, snakes and rats like to eat these flies and grasshoppers. So this forms one kind of a food chain. Now within the same ecosystem, let's introduce some more species like rabbit, squirrel and deer who feed on plants and trees. Some birds eat rabbit and squirrel. Then animals like fox also eats rabbit and squirrel. Here we see another food chain. Between these two food chains, you will find some interlinkage, wherein one species of animal is dependent on both the food chain. Now this interlinkage of food chain is called as a food web. Now this kind of interlinkage also happens between two different ecosystems. We'll take an example of aquatic ecosystem. Fish eat microworms, insects, plants and leaves. Then small fish gets eaten by bigger fish. Like this, the chain continues. So this is another form of food chain of an aquatic ecosystem. If you notice, there's an interaction between these two food chain. As I said, fish eats insects, flies, leaves and flowers. These insects and flies are also part of the terrestrial ecosystem and they have their own food chain. But now, all of a sudden, there is an indirect interaction between the terrestrial food chain and the aquatic food chain. That means there is an indirect interaction between species of different ecosystem. Now this kind of interlinkage of two different food chains, regardless of which ecosystem they belong to, forms a food web. So basically the role of a food web is to reveal the patterns of energy flow through different species and ecosystem.